6:15 on a Wednesday evening, Fresh Mart supermarket in Newark, New Jersey. The kind of hour when exhausted commuters grabbed milk and bread before heading home to families waiting in suburban houses they could barely afford. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that particular shade of commercial brightness that made fresh produce look slightly less fresh and tired faces look slightly more tired. Marcus Harrison Bennett pushed a squeaking metal cart down the cereal aisle, his 8-year-old daughter Emma skipping alongside him. Her hand clutched a piece of paper covered in crooked blue crayon, a shopping list she'd written herself as homework for her third-grade math class. Milk, bread, small bear. The bear was underlined 3 times and decorated with stars. Straight A's on her report card meant one reward her choice budget permitting. The red yarn bracelet around Marcus's wrist caught the light as he reached for a box of Cheerios. Emma had made it 2 years ago, sitting cross-legged on their apartment floor, while he'd gasped for air during his first real panic attack after Rachel's funeral. She'd been 6, then small hands working yarn into a braid while explaining with the certainty only children possess that red meant courage and love, the 2 things he needed most. $47.32 remained until Friday's paycheck. Milk bread and that $12 stuffed bear would leave him with $23 for gas and anything Emma's school might spring on him. Living paycheck to paycheck meant these calculations happened automatically, now a background process running constantly in his mind. Emma hummed something from a cartoon he'd never watched, oblivious to spreadsheets and stress. Marcus envied that innocence, even as he worked daily to preserve it. 2 aisles over in the wine section, where bottles cost more than his weekly grocery budget, Victoria Catherine Sterling examined a label on a Veuve Clicquot. The crimson dress she wore probably cost what Marcus earned in a month, Versace. If he had to guess, though, his knowledge of designer fashion extended only as far as logos he'd seen in magazine ads. Her heels clicked against linoleum with the sharp precision of someone accustomed to expensive floors that didn't squeak or stick. Marcus recognized her instantly. 6 months didn't erase the memory of being dismissed like furniture, of watching her drop his 47-page security assessment onto her desk without reading past the first paragraph. "You're just the Wi-Fi guy. Don't overstep your boundaries." The words had landed with the casual cruelty of someone who'd forgotten that invisible people still had ears. He'd spent 3 weeks on that assessment, working late, after Emma went to bed, documenting vulnerabilities he'd noticed while upgrading Sterling Medical's network infrastructure. Executive schedules posted publicly online. No personal security for C-suite executives during public appearances. Employees wearing company badges in coffee shops where anyone could photograph them, gather names, build profiles. Simple fixes that could prevent exactly the kind of targeted attack that Marcus stopped. His training kicked in the way it always did, that Port Authority muscle memory that 5 years away from the job hadn't erased. Pattern recognition, threat assessment, the ability to spot predators in crowds of prey. 2 men mid-30s moving through Fresh Mart with purpose that had nothing to do with grocery shopping. They weren't browsing. They were tracking. The first man, tall, approximately 6 feet, maybe 190, dark jacket, hands in pockets, positioned himself at the far end of the wine aisle. The second, shorter and stockier, circled around from the opposite direction. Military precision disguised as casual browsing. They communicated through glances and head tilts, the kind of silent coordination that came from training or repeated practice. And both men were focused entirely on Victoria Sterling. Marcus's pulse accelerated. He maneuvered his cart closer, blocking Emma's view while keeping the men in his peripheral vision. The shorter one adjusted his jacket, and Marcus caught the glint of metal, a utility knife, the kind with retractable blades sold for cutting boxes and drywall. Intimidation weapon not meant to kill, but dangerous enough in practiced hands. Emma tugged his sleeve. Her voice dropped to a whisper, picking up on tension the way children do, reading their parents' bodies like early warning systems. "Daddy, Why are those men watching the pretty lady? Ice flooded Marcus's veins. If his 8-year-old could sense the threat, they were past the point of subtlety. He touched the red bracelet, felt its rough texture against his skin, and breathed the way Emma had taught him. Count to 5. Focus. Decide. The taller man moved first. Victoria had just selected her champagne $80 a bottle, Marcus noted absurdly when both men closed in from opposite sides. Professional. Practiced. Inevitable. A knife blade appeared at Victoria's ribs, pressed against crimson fabric. Don't move or she gets hurt. The champagne bottle slipped from Victoria's hands and exploded against the floor. $80 of French bubbles spreading across cheap linoleum in a pool that caught the fluorescent light and turned it golden. Someone screamed. The store's ambient noise scanners, beeping Muzak, playing carts rattling, collapsed into shocked silence. Then chaos. Customers scattered, some running for exits, others diving behind displays. Parents grabbing children and fleeing toward the relative safety of the parking lot. Nobody moved to help, nobody called out, nobody intervened. Victoria's eyes went wide, scanning faces in the crowd with the desperate hope of someone drowning and searching for a lifeline. Her lips formed words that came out strangled and small. Please. Someone help me. A woman with a Coach purse laughed. Actually laughed as she wheeled her cart past the scene. Looks like the rich lady's having problems. Maybe if she wasn't so high and mighty all the time, someone might actually care. A man in a business suit nodded agreement, slowing down just enough to watch, but not enough to be involved. I recognize her from CNBC. Sterling Medical CEO, always talking about optimizing efficiency. That's code for firing people. My buddy's company went under competing with them. Another voice from the dispersing crowd, already halfway to the exit. She probably deserves whatever happens. Rich people like that think they own everything. Victoria heard every word. Marcus watched recognition and horror cross her face as she realized the crowd wouldn't save her because they wanted to see her suffer. She'd built walls so high that now when she needed help, those walls had become a prison. The taller attacker pressed the blade harder, drawing a small gasp from Victoria. Back exit. Walk slowly. Anyone follows. Anyone calls the cops. She bleeds. Marcus's hand found Emma's shoulder and squeezed gently. His daughter looked up at him with those blue eyes that were Rachel's eyes, waiting for guidance in a world that had suddenly become incomprehensible. Emma, sweetheart, I need you to do something very important for me. A mission. Her face went serious, sensing the weight in his words. Like a secret mission. Exactly like that. I need you to stand right here behind the paper towel display. Count all the red things you can see. Don't move. Don't look anywhere else until I come back for you. Can you be brave for me? Emma's chin lifted, trying to look stronger than she felt. How high should I count? As high as you need to. And M. Our rule about strangers. Don't talk to them. And if anyone tries to make me go somewhere, scream really loud. That's my smart girl. Marcus positioned the cart to shield her, tucked among the Charmin and Bounty displays where she'd be partially hidden, but could still see him if she peeked. Then he straightened, touched the red bracelet one more time, and turned to face 2 men with knives and a woman who'd once told him he was just the Wi-Fi guy. Rachel's voice in his head as clear as if she were standing beside him instead of 2 years dead in Cedar Lawn Cemetery. Emma's watching what kind of man you are. Show her. The panic attack threatened at the edges of his consciousness, racing. Heart-shallow breath, the familiar tightening in his chest that meant his body remembered every loss and feared every new risk. But Emma had taught him how to breathe through fear. Count. Focus. Act. Marcus's voice cut through the chaos with the kind of calm that came from 5 years teaching crisis management to security professionals. You just picked the wrong father to threaten gentlemen. Every conversation in Freshmart stopped. 50-plus customers who'd been fleeing or hiding froze mid-step to stare at the man in the faded Gap t-shirt who'd just challenged armed criminals with a daughter watching from behind paper products. The taller attacker turned irritation flashing across his features. A middle-aged suburban dad interrupting a professional operation. "Back off. This doesn't concern you." Marcus recognized the shorter man now, memory clicking into place with the certainty of facial recognition software. Kyle Jason Barrett. 3 years ago, Marcus had taught a conflict management course at Port Authority. Kyle had sat in the third row asking intelligent questions about threat assessment and de-escalation tactics. He'd shown Marcus photos of his wife and infant son during lunch break, proud father energy radiating off him as he'd described his boy's first steps. "How did you go from dedicated security professional to this, Kyle?" But Marcus filed that question away. For later. Right now he had seconds to decide walk away and teach Emma that safety meant abandoning others in danger, or intervene and risk leaving her orphaned. Rachel's voice again. "You already know the answer. You've always known." The supermarket offered resources if you knew how to read environments the way Marcus had been trained to. Narrow aisles that limited attacker mobility. Soda bottles, 2-liter Coca-Colas stacked on an end cap display, filled with carbonated pressure, waiting to be weaponized. A janitor's mop bucket near customer service full of soapy water that could turn floors into skating rinks. Wine bottles that could shatter into dangerous edges if needed. And most importantly, the attackers carried utility knives, not guns. Intimidation tools with retractable blades that would fold under pressure. They were planning an abduction, not a murder. That gave Marcus options. Kyle's partner shifted his grip on Victoria, pressing the blade harder against her ribs. "Walk away, or your kid sees something she shouldn't." Wrong thing to say. The absolute wrong thing to say. Marcus grabbed 2 Coca-Cola bottles in one smooth motion, shaking the first violently as he closed the distance. The metal cart rattled as he shoved it ahead of him like a battering ram. 3 years of teaching threat assessment meant he knew exactly where to strike, not to kill, but to disable. The bottle cap came off with a hiss, and Marcus aimed the carbonated geyser directly into the taller man's face. Sticky brown soda and stinging carbonation hit eyes and nose and mouth, triggering reflexive panic. The attacker released Victoria and staggered backward, clawing at his faceblade, forgotten as basic biology took over. Victoria dropped to her knees, survival instincts finally kicking in. Kyle Barrett moved fast, training evident in the way he pivoted and lunged. But Marcus had taught that pivot knew the timing and rhythm. He drove the shopping cart's metal edge into Kyle's extended arm, not the hand holding the knife, but the median nerve cluster in the forearm that controlled grip strength. The utility knife clattered to the floor, its cheap blade retracting into the handle on impact. Marcus kicked it away, sent it skittering under the wine rack where neither attacker could easily retrieve it. But then his foot hit the spreading puddle of champagne and Coca-Cola, and 5 years away from active security work showed itself. His Nike sole worn smooth from too many miles and not enough money for replacements lost traction. He stumbled, and Kyle's fist connected with his ribs with the kind of force that came from desperate men with nothing left to lose. Pain exploded across Marcus's right side. Not the dull ache of a bruise, but the sharp, specific agony of bones giving way under impact. A sound like breaking sticks, except the sticks were parts of him. He'd felt this before 10 years ago during training exercises at Port Authority. Cracked ribs felt exactly like this. Breathing became knives moving, became torture, and your body screamed to curl up and protect the damaged parts. But Emma was 20 feet away, counting red things and trusting her father to come back safe. Marcus grabbed the mop bucket and upended its contents in the taller attacker's path. 15 liters of soapy Mr. Clean spread across linoleum, creating a surface slicker than ice. The man hit it at a run and went down hard, skull bouncing off the floor with a sound Marcus hoped wasn't as bad as it seemed. Kyle came at him again, fist cocked for another rib shot, but this time Marcus was ready. He caught Kyle's wrist mid-swing and used the momentum against him, basic judo taught in every self-defense course effective when size and strength weren't advantages. Kyle's head struck the wine rack's lower shelf, solid oak meeting skull with a crack that echoed through the store. Not unconscious, but dazed, disoriented. Down. 43 seconds from first bottle cap to final takedown. Marcus's ribs screamed with every breath, but both attackers were neutralized. Victoria was safe, and Emma was still tucked behind paper towels counting red things like her world hadn't just tilted on its axis. Then a boot pressed down on Kyle Barrett's chest, and Marcus looked up to see a man in his early 60s, silver hair, cut military short standing, with the kind of posture that came from decades of command. "Stay down, son. You've made enough poor choices for one day." The voice carried authority that made even Kyle, dazed and bleeding from a scalp cut, go still and compliant. Robert Dawson extended his free hand to Marcus, who took it carefully, each movement sending fresh waves of pain through his damaged ribs. "Good work. Haven't seen civilian intervention like that since I left the Marines. You've had professional training, some, a while ago. Current enough. You handled those two better than most would have, especially protecting civilians and minimizing damage." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Newark PD probably 3 minutes out. Ambulances maybe 5. Emma's voice cut through the aftermath, small and worried and trying so hard to be brave. "Daddy, I counted 14 red things. Can I stop now?" Marcus turned, and despite the ribs and the adrenaline crash starting to hit, he smiled for his daughter. "You can stop, sweetheart. You did perfect. Come here." Emma ran to him, and he caught her carefully, so carefully, and held her while she trembled against his chest. "You were very brave, Con. The bad men can't hurt anyone now. You stopped them. Everyone saw." But her eyes were wet, and Marcus knew she'd peeked, had seen more than he wanted her to see, would have questions he wasn't sure how to answer. The store manager appeared, phone pressed to his ear, corporate panic written across his face as he surveyed broken bottles and bleeding criminals and the security footage that would be on every news site by morning. Victoria Sterling stood, slowly, expensive dress, ruined by champagne and soda. Perfect hair, disheveled makeup smeared. She stared at Marcus with an expression somewhere between gratitude and incomprehension. "I know you. You worked at Sterling Medical 6 months ago." "Contract work." Her voice dropped, memory clearly returning. "I wasn't very kind to you." Marcus shifted Emma's weight, trying to breathe shallow so his ribs wouldn't scream quite so loud. "No, you weren't, but that's not why I helped." "Then why? 'Cause it was the right thing to do when someone needs help. Simple as that." The answer seemed to shock her more than the attack had, as if the concept of helping without calculation, without expecting return on investment, was foreign territory she'd never mapped. Police burst through the front entrance, weapons drawn, shouting commands that sorted the room into victims, witnesses, and threats. Detective Rodriguez took one look at the scene and sighed the sigh of a man who knew his evening just got complicated. Paramedics followed, and one of them, young, competent name tag reading J. Washington, knelt beside Marcus with practiced efficiency. "Sir, I need to check those ribs. From the way you're breathing, I'm guessing fractured, maybe 2 or 3. I don't have good insurance. What's an ambulance ride cost? $1,200 to $1,800, sir. But you need x-rays, possibly CT scan to check for internal bleeding. I'll drive to urgent care. Cheaper." Washington's expression said he'd heard this too many times from too many people who chose financial survival over physical health. "At least let me wrap them. And if you start coughing blood or feeling dizzy, you need to go to an ER immediately." "Deal, deal." The paramedic worked quickly, wrapping Marcus's torso in supportive bandages that helped stabilize the breaks, but did nothing for the pain. Emma watched with wide eyes, one hand clutching her recovered teddy bear, the other gripping her father's arm. "Is Daddy going to be okay?" "He's tough, but he needs rest. No heavy lifting for at least 2 weeks." Emma nodded solemnly, already mentally cataloging all the things she'd need to help with reaching high shelves, carrying, laundry, any task that might hurt her father's ribs. Robert Dawson handed Marcus a business card while the paramedic finished. Bob Dawson. Dawson Security Consulting. Call me when those ribs heal. I hire men like you ones who can keep their heads when everything's chaos. I have a stable life now. My daughter needs stability, not... Life has a way of changing whether we want it to or not. Keep the card. Opportunities don't knock twice. Marcus pocketed the card more from politeness than interest. Detective Rodriguez approached with a notepad and the weary expression of someone whose paperwork just tripled. Who's the victim and who's the good Samaritan? Marcus explained clearly, professionally, the way his Port Authority training had taught him, but then he did something that made Rodriguez's eyebrows rise. I have photos of the two attackers surveilling Ms. Sterling before they moved in. Timestamps show 6 minutes of stalking behavior before the assault. He pulled out his iPhone 8 with a cracked screen because replacing it cost money better spent on Emma, and showed the detective a series of images. Both attackers circling the wine section. Kyle checking his watch twice. The taller man adjusting his jacket to access the knife. All documented with timestamps that would hold up in court. You were gathering evidence before you intervened, old habits. I used to train security personnel for Port Authority. Threat assessment and crisis response. Rodriguez studied Marcus with new respect. We'll need your formal statement, but this is prosecution's dream. Most civilians can't remember what attackers were wearing. You documented their M.O. A murmur rippled through the crowd that had reformed now that danger had passed. This wasn't just a lucky civilian with good instincts. This was a professional who'd made a career decision to help rather than walk away. Corporate security arrived 15 minutes too late, bursting through the entrance with sterling medical badges and expensive suits. Thomas Richard Ashford, 52 VP of Research and Development, led the charge. Ms. Sterling, are you all right? The board's been notified. They're extremely concerned. Victoria pulled herself together, CEO mask sliding back into place despite the ruined dress and trembling hands. I'm fine, Thomas. Thanks to Mr. Bennett here. Ashford glanced at Marcus the way people glance at furniture, acknowledging presence without really seeing. Yes. Very good. We'll ensure you receive appropriate thanks. The tone dripped with condescension, that particular brand of corporate dismissal reserved for service workers and contractors. Appropriate thanks probably meant a $500 check and a form letter. Victoria stepped closer to Marcus, and for a moment the CEO mask slipped enough to show genuine emotion underneath. I'm certain we'll speak again soon, Mr. Bennett. Sterling Medical owes you a considerable debt. Marcus nodded, not expecting anything, not wanting anything except to get Emma home and ice his ribs and pretend this day had been normal. Take care of yourself, Ms. Sterling, and maybe consider that security assessment I submitted back in May. Page 12 specifically. The gentle reminder, not accusatory, just factual, made Victoria flinch as if he'd struck her. Bob Dawson walked Marcus and Emma toward the side exit, away from the growing media presence at the main entrance. News vans were already setting up cameras pointing toward the store where ordinary Wednesday grocery shopping had turned into something viral-worthy. Smart move avoiding the cameras. Your daughter's been through enough without being plastered on every screen in the country. Thank you for stepping in with Kyle Barrett. I couldn't have held both of them much longer. You did fine, better than fine. That was textbook threat neutralization with improvised weapons. Where'd you train? Port Authority, New York. 5 years teaching conflict management and crisis response. Left 2 years ago when my wife died. Emma needed stability more than I needed career advancement. Bob's expression softened with understanding that only came from shared loss. I lost my son Ethan 8 years ago. Car accident, drunk driver. He was 28. I'm sorry, me too. But life keeps moving whether we want it to or not. That card I gave you, the offer's real. When you're ready, if you're ready, I could use someone with your skill set. And it's flexible work. Set your own hours work around your daughter's schedule. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. They reached Marcus's Honda Civic, 14 years old, check engine light permanently on 186,000 miles, that showed in every rattle and squeak. Emma climbed into her booster seat without being asked, understanding, with the intuition children possess, that this wasn't a time for questions or delays. Marcus drove carefully, each turn of the steering wheel sending fresh spikes of pain through his ribs. Emma fell asleep before they left the parking lot, exhausted by adrenaline crash and fear finally released. Her teddy bear was clutched tight against her chest, and in sleep she looked even younger than 8, vulnerable in ways that made Marcus's chest ache with something deeper than broken bones. He avoided home. A news van was already parked outside their apartment building. How did they get his address so fast, and he wasn't ready to deal with reporters and cameras and questions about heroism when all he felt was tired and hurt and worried about how much urgent care would cost without good insurance? Margaret and Howard Fletcher lived 20 minutes away in Montclair, in the house where Rachel had grown up, where Marcus had spent countless Sunday dinners back when his wife was alive and the future seemed navigable. They'd offered to watch Emma tonight, unaware of what had happened, just grandparents wanting time with their only grandchild. Margaret opened the door and immediately saw something was wrong. Marcus. What happened? 2 men tried to kidnap someone at Freshmart. I intervened, cracked some ribs. Emma's fine, just shaken up. She pulled him inside, careful not to jostle his injuries, while Howard appeared from the living room with reading glasses still perched on his nose. We need to get you to urgent care. After Emma's settled. I don't want her scared. They carried his sleeping daughter to the guest room, Rachel's childhood bedroom still decorated with posters of boy bands from the early 2000s, and tucked her in with practiced grandparent efficiency. Only when Emma was safely asleep did Marcus allow himself to sit down on the Fletchers' worn couch and acknowledge how much every breath hurt. Tell us everything. Marcus did, leaving nothing out except the part where he'd recognized Kyle Barrett from his training courses. That detail felt private somehow, like a betrayal to share that someone he'd taught had fallen so far. The television flickered in the corner, volume low. Howard had been watching the evening news when they arrived. Now the news was about them. Breaking story tonight from Newark, New Jersey, where an attempted kidnapping was stopped by an unlikely hero. The screen filled with cell phone footage from multiple angles. Marcus watching the attackers with professional assessment. Marcus shaking the Coke bottle and unleashing carbonated chaos. The shopping cart strike. Kyle Barrett going down. 43 seconds compressed into viral content that already had 100,000 views and climbing. That little girl writing something on a piece of paper, the anchor continued. Sources tell us that's his 8-year-old daughter, and that note she's adding to her shopping list. It says, "Daddy is brave." And folks, if that doesn't restore your faith in everyday heroes, I don't know what will. Margaret was crying quietly, one hand over her mouth. Howard's jaw was set in that particular way that meant he was processing emotions too big for words. You could have died. Emma could have lost you the same way she lost Rachel. I know. Then why? Because Emma was watching. And because someone needed help. Those are the only reasons that mattered in the moment. His phone buzzed insistently. Marcus pulled it out and immediately regretted checking. 89 missed calls. 640 emails. Text messages flooding in faster than he could read them. One voicemail from a number he recognized, Jeffrey Palmer, his former supervisor at Sterling Medical's IT department. Marcus saw the news. Can't believe it. Board's asking about you. Call me ASAP. Marcus silenced the phone and set it face down. Tomorrow's problem. Tonight I just need to sleep if these ribs let me. But sleep didn't come easily. At 10:30, alone in the Fletchers' guest bathroom with Emma safely asleep 2 doors down, Marcus felt the panic attack build with familiar inevitability. Adrenaline had held it at bay for hours, but now his body demanded payment for all that borrowed courage. His heart rate spiked to 145 beats per minute. Hands trembled uncontrollably. Breathing became impossible, lungs refusing to expand. chest-constricting vision, tunneling to a pinpoint. The thought spiral started. Emma could be an orphan. You could have died. She could have watched you die. Just like Rachel died. Everyone leaves. Everyone dies. You can't protect anyone. Marcus gripped the sink and forced himself through the exercises Emma had taught him when she was 6 years old, and he was drowning in grief. Touch the red bracelet. Feel its texture. Count 1. Mississippi. 2. Mississippi 3. Mississippi. Breathe in for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out for 6. Repeat. 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 Rachel's voice in his memory clear as the day he'd proposed to her on the Brooklyn Bridge at sunset. You're stronger than you think, Marcus. You just forget sometimes. 5 minutes later, the panic subsided, leaving him exhausted but functional. He splashed cold water on his face and studied his reflection in the mirror. 35 years old, looking 40. Gray creeping into his temples. Lines around his eyes that hadn't been there when Rachel was alive. The face of a man who'd survived but forgotten how to live. Midnight brought a text from an unknown number that made his breath catch. Mr. Bennett, this is Victoria Sterling. Dr. Preston gave me your contact information. I need to speak with you personally, not through corporate representatives. This is important. Please call when you can. V.S. Marcus stared at the message for 5 minutes before responding. Coffee shop near my in-laws' house tomorrow, 7 p.m. Come alone. No lawyers, no PR team. Just us. The reply came within seconds. I'll be there. Thank you. V.S. Across town in a corner office on the 43rd floor of Sterling Medical's Manhattan headquarters. Victoria Catherine Sterling sat alone at 1:30 in the morning and watched the viral video for the 11th time. The board meeting had ended 2 hours ago. 90-day ultimatum delivered. Transform or resign. Demonstrate measurable leadership change or step aside for Richard Blackwell, who'd been circling her position like a shark smelling blood for the past 6 months. But the ultimatum wasn't what kept her awake. The video was. She watched herself beg strangers for help, watched them laugh and walk away, watched them debate whether she deserved to be kidnapped, watched Marcus Bennett, the man she'd dismissed as just the Wi-Fi guy, risk his life for someone who'd treated him with casual cruelty. The comment section was brutal in its honesty. IT guy she fired just saved her life with Coca-Cola. Karma is watching. That little girl writing "Daddy is brave" destroyed me. Notice how nobody helped the rich CEO. That's what happens when you treat people like garbage, when you disrespect blue-collar workers and then they save your life anyway. Character revealed. Victoria closed her laptop and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Her empire spread below in lights and steel and glass. Sterling Medical Systems built from nothing, now worth $1.2 billion with technology that genuinely saved lives. But tonight, in a New Jersey supermarket, not one person had cared if she lived or died. Except Marcus Bennett, who had every reason to let her suffer. The phone on her desk showed 47 voicemails from board members, investors, media outlets. She ignored all of them and pulled up an old file, personnel records from May when she'd fired a freelance IT contractor for overstepping his boundaries. Marcus Harrison Bennett, 35 years old. Previous employment, Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, Senior Security Training Specialist, 2015-2022. Specialized in conflict management, threat assessment, crisis response training. Resignation effective, November 2022. Reason listed as family circumstances. Current employment, freelance IT support, $35,000 annually. Part-time night security guard, $18,000 annually. Single father, 1 dependent daughter. 47-page security assessment submitted May 15th. Cost $5,000 for analysis and recommendations. Victoria's response in the file, her own words preserved in email form, report rejected. Bennett is IT contractor, not security consultant. Do not pay. Do not renew contract. Page 12 of that rejected assessment. Executive vulnerability during public appearances. Recommendation. Personal security detail for C-suite executives, especially CEO. Estimated annual cost, $85,000. Potential cost of kidnapping/assassination, immeasurable. Page 18. Public schedule exposure. Recommendation. Remove detailed executive calendars from company website. Cost $0. Implementation time. 2 hours. Page 23. Employee badge visibility. Recommendation. Prohibit wearing company identification in public spaces. Train staff on social engineering risks. Cost $5,000 training program. Potential prevented loss. Corporate espionage targeted attacks. Every recommendation Marcus had made, she'd ignored. And today she'd nearly died because of that arrogance. Victoria opened her desk drawer and pulled out a photograph she kept hidden there. Elena Sterling, 47 years old, wearing a Denny's uniform and smiling despite exhaustion written in every line of her face. Victoria's mother, dead 19 years from pancreatic cancer that could have been detected early if they'd been able to afford screening. Would you be proud of who I became, Mom, or ashamed? The answer came swift and certain. Ashamed. Elena Sterling had cleaned office buildings for minimum wage and still said thank you to janitors. She'd worked 3 jobs and still left 25% tips for waitstaff. She'd died poor but rich in dignity, while her daughter had become rich in money and poor in everything that actually mattered. At 2:17 in the morning, Victoria Catherine Sterling made a decision that would change everything or destroy her completely. She couldn't tell which, and for the first time in 15 years she didn't care about calculating odds or managing risk. She was going to change. Actually change, not perform change for board approval. And she was going to start by meeting Marcus Bennett tomorrow and asking him something. She hadn't asked anyone in a decade. Will you help me become someone worth saving? Thursday morning arrived with the weight of consequences Marcus hadn't anticipated. His phone had charged overnight on the Fletcher's kitchen counter, and when he picked it up at 6:30, the screen showed notifications that had accumulated like digital snowdrift. 120 missed calls, 740 emails, text messages numbering in the triple digits. Social media accounts he barely used now flooded with friend requests and mentions and messages from strangers who felt entitled to his attention because a 43-second video had made him public property. The hashtag #GroceryDad trended #1 nationally. 12.8 million views in under 24 hours. Comment sections filled with people dissecting his actions, praising his courage, debating whether he'd endangered his daughter, arguing about class dynamics and corporate responsibility, and everything except the simple fact that someone had needed help and he'd provided it. Margaret knocked softly before entering the guest room where Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, ribs screaming protest at the simple act of pulling on yesterday's shirt. Coffee's ready. Howard's making Emma pancakes, and there are 3 news vans parked across the street. They found your address too. Apparently we're part of the story now. Reporters want to interview the grandparents of the brave little girl who counted red things while her father fought criminals. I'm sorry, I never meant to drag you into this. Don't apologize for doing the right thing, Marcus. But we need to figure out how you're going to handle this media circus. They're not going away just because you want them to. Emma appeared in the doorway, already dressed in the spare clothes Margaret kept for overnight visits. Her eyes were puffy from sleep and something else, the residual fear children carry after witnessing their safe world crack open to reveal danger underneath. Are those people outside because of what happened at the store? Yes, sweetheart. They want to ask Daddy questions about yesterday. Emma climbed onto the bed next to him, careful not to jostle his injured side. You don't have to talk to them if you don't want to. That's the rule about strangers, right? You don't have to do what they say. That's exactly right. You're such a smart girl. but Emma's expression stayed serious, processing something too heavy for 8 years old. Daddy, the bad men, are they going to come back? The question landed like a punch to his already damaged ribs. Marcus pulled her close, breathing through the pain. No, baby. The police have them. They can't hurt anyone anymore. What if there are more bad men? Then Daddy will keep you safe. That's my job. That's always my job. But what if you get hurt worse next time? What if you can't come back to me? The fear underneath those words, the terror that had been building since Rachel's death, the knowledge that parents could leave and never return, broke something in Marcus's chest that had nothing to do with fractured bones. I'm not going anywhere, Em. I promise I'm not leaving you. Mommy promised too, and then she didn't come home. There was no answer to that. No reassurance that wouldn't be a lie. Rachel had promised to come home from her shift and instead came home in a casket. Promises meant nothing against drunk drivers and random chance, and the 1,000 ways the universe could rip families apart. So Marcus just held his daughter and let her cry, and wished he could promise her a world that didn't require 8-year-olds to be brave in grocery stores. Howard appeared in the doorway, phone in hand, expression carefully neutral. Marcus, there's a call you should take. Bob Dawson from yesterday. Says it's about handling the media attention. Marcus extracted himself carefully from Emma's grip and took the phone. Mr. Dawson. Call me Bob. Listen, I've been watching the news coverage. This thing's exploding faster than you can manage alone. You need help controlling the narrative before it controls you. I don't want a narrative. I just want this to go away. It won't. Not for another week at minimum, possibly longer if new angles develop. But I can help you shut it down faster. One interview, your term's professional outlet. You give them what they want, set firm boundaries, then you're done. No more questions, no more chasing you down. And if they don't respect boundaries, then they deal with me, and I'm considerably less polite than you are. Bob's plan was military precise. Amanda Ruth Wallace from National Morning News, vetted as fair and professional. Neutral location, not Marcus's home, not the supermarket somewhere public, but controlled. 30 minutes maximum. No questions about Emma beyond general well-being. No questions about Rachel's death. Focus on the incident itself, his background, his decision-making process. And most importantly, a clear statement at the end that this would be his only interview, that he was requesting privacy to return to normal life with his daughter. The interview's set for tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Gives you today to rest and prepare. I'll be there as your advisor. Make sure they stick to agreed terms. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. Bob's pause carried weight. My son died 8 years ago. Car accident, drunk driver, same as your wife. He was 28, and after he died I realized I'd spent too much time building a business and not enough time building relationships that mattered. You remind me of him, good man, trying to do right by his family in a world that makes that harder than it should be. Consider this paying forward the help I wish someone had given me. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We've got work to do keeping you from being eaten alive by your own heroism. The call with Victoria happened at exactly 7 p.m. at a coffee shop called Perks and Pros, tucked into a Montclair side street where corporate CEOs didn't typically venture. Marcus arrived 10 minutes early, claimed a corner table with sightlines to both entrances, ordered black coffee he couldn't taste through the pain medication he'd taken for his ribs. Victoria arrived at 7:02 and the transformation from yesterday stopped him mid-sip. Gone was the Versace power armor. She wore dark Levi's that looked like actual Levi's instead of designer approximations, a cream cable-knit sweater from J. Crew's clearance rack, if he had to guess minimal makeup that revealed the fine lines around her eyes and the dark circles beneath them. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No salon styling, no carefully crafted image. She looked human, tired, scared, 38 years old instead of ageless and untouchable. Thank you for meeting me. I know I don't deserve this courtesy. You wanted to talk. I'm listening. Victoria sat hands wrapped around the coffee cup he'd ordered for her black no sugar because he remembered from 6 months ago how she'd snapped at her assistant for bringing her a latte with the wrong milk. I've rehearsed this conversation a dozen times, prepared corporate talking points, practiced my delivery, but it's all garbage, so I'm just going to ask, why did you help me yesterday? Because you needed help. After how I treated you, after I rejected your security assessment, after I called you just the Wi-Fi guy. I remember. And yes, after all that. Because what happened at Freshmart wasn't about our history. It was about doing what's right in that moment with my daughter watching. Victoria's composure cracked, tears forming that she didn't bother hiding. Most people act from self-interest. They calculate advantage even when they claim otherwise. In that moment, the calculation was simple. I had skills, you needed help, and Emma was learning what kind of man her father chooses to be when it costs him something. The tears spilled over, and Victoria wiped them away with the back of her hand. No elegant dabbing or careful preservation of makeup. Your daughter. How is she handling this? Scared? Asking questions I don't know how to answer. Worried the bad men will come back. Worried I'll get hurt worse next time. Worried I'll leave her the way her mother did. Victoria's hand went to her mouth. Your wife. I saw in your personnel file. Car accident 2 years ago this November. Drunk driver 2:30 in the morning. She was coming home from a 16-hour shift at the hospital. Emma was 6. I had to tell her that Mommy wasn't coming home, and I still don't think she fully believes me when I promise I won't leave too. The shared grief between them created unexpected connection. Two people who'd lost family to medical tragedies that better systems might have prevented. My mother died when I was 19, pancreatic cancer stage 4. She'd hidden symptoms for 5 months because we couldn't afford doctor visits. By the time she collapsed at work and got diagnosed, it was too late. Marcus understood suddenly why Victoria had built Sterling Medical, why she'd focused on affordable diagnostic technology, why the mission mattered enough to sacrifice everything else. That's why you started the company. I swore I'd never be poor again, swore I'd create technology that would catch cancers early before they became death sentences. Save people like her. But somewhere along the way, the mission became about success instead of service. Victoria nodded, the admission costing her visible effort. I became the kind of person who looks through others instead of at them, who treats employees like interchangeable resources, who fires IT contractors for trying to help because accepting help would mean admitting I don't know everything. The board gave you an ultimatum, 90 days to demonstrate meaningful leadership transformation or resign. They already have my replacement picked out. Richard Blackwell's been circling like a vulture for months. And you want what from me exactly? Victoria leaned forward, intensity replacing vulnerability. I need someone who will tell me the truth, someone who sees people clearly, who understands both security and human dignity. Someone who isn't afraid to call me out when I'm reverting to old patterns. You want me to join Sterling as Chief Security Officer, not consultant, full executive position with board-level reporting. You'd have authority to implement proper security protocols, but also to assess and address the culture that creates vulnerabilities. Marcus's coffee had gone cold while she spoke. He set it down carefully. I have an 8-year-old daughter who comes first always. My schedule revolves around Emma, not Sterling Medical. I wouldn't respect you if she didn't come first. The terms would be completely flexible, work from home when needed, no evening meetings unless you choose full autonomy in scheduling. And when it doesn't work out, when we discover we're fundamentally incompatible, 6 months severance. Emma's education fund remains untouched regardless. You walk away with full pay and a recommendation letter. What education fund? Victoria pulled out a tablet, showed him a legal document already drafted and notarized. $250,000 held in trust for Emma Bennett's education from kindergarten through graduate school. Managed by independent trustee, accessible to her at 18 for college expenses. This exists whether you take the job or not. It's separate my way of thanking you for something that can't actually be repaid. Marcus stared at numbers that represented security he'd thought impossible. Emma could go to any college she wanted, pursue any dream without the crushing debt that had forced him to join the military for tuition assistance before his medical disqualification. This is too much. It's not enough. You saved my life and got injured doing it. This doesn't balance that scale. Nothing could, but it ensures your daughter's future is secure, no matter what happens to you. Why medical diagnostics? Of all the industries you could have chosen. Victoria's voice dropped raw with old pain. Because 19 years ago, I held my mother's hand while she died in hospice care, and her last words were, "Do something that matters. Victoria. Help people like me." I built Sterling to honor that promise, but somewhere I lost track of the people part. Focused on technology and profit margins and market dominance while forgetting that every patient our devices scan is someone's mother, someone's daughter. Every patient we save means some other girl doesn't have to watch school cancer destroy the person she loves most. Marcus understood then that this wasn't entirely about board ultimatums or corporate optics. Victoria Sterling was drowning and reaching for a lifeline from the last person who had reason to throw her one. The salary offer was $165,000 annually, more than triple his current income. Stock options that could be worth significant money if Sterling's technology succeeded. Complete control over security budget and staffing. Authority to challenge any decision that created vulnerabilities, including decisions made by the CEO herself. I need conditions beyond what you've outlined. Name them. Title has to be Chief Security Officer with board reporting independent of CEO oversight. I won't be effective if I can only tell you what you want to hear. Agreed. Scope includes investigating the attack yesterday. Kyle Barrett and his partner weren't random criminals. This was planned, funded, coordinated. I need to know who hired them and why. The FBI's already investigating that angle. Then I'll coordinate with FBI while running my own parallel investigation. Because if someone wanted you dead or kidnapped badly enough to hire professionals, they might try again. Victoria's face paled. You think there could be another attempt? I think we need to operate as if there will be until we understand the full threat picture. Which means you accept personal security driver, route randomization schedule, obscuration. All the things I recommended in May that you called paranoid overreach. I'll accept whatever you recommend. No arguments. Marcus studied her reading micro-expressions and body language the way his training had taught him. No deception indicators. No hidden agendas visible in posture or eye contact. Either she was genuinely committed to change, or she was a world-class actress. I start Wednesday. Need 2 days to close existing IT contracts and prepare Emma for the transition. And one more thing, when this doesn't work. When I inevitably fail to transform your leadership because people don't actually change just because they want to. I need you to promise Emma's fund stays protected. People can change if they really want to badly enough. And I want this more than I've wanted anything since my mother died. Victoria extended her hand across the table. Do we have an agreement? Chief Security Officer Bennett Marcus shook, sealing a deal that would either save Victoria Sterling's soul or destroy his carefully rebuilt life. Possibly both. We have an agreement. But Victoria, I'm not doing this to save your job or your reputation. I'm doing this because Sterling Medical's technology actually saves lives, and that mission is worth protecting, even if the person leading it isn't perfect yet. Yet. The word carried more hope than he'd intended to offer. Wednesday morning, Marcus stood outside Sterling Medical's Manhattan headquarters at 8:45, watching streams of employees badge through security turnstiles with the resignation of people who'd sold their souls for health insurance and 401k matching. The building was glass and steel corporate anonymity. 52 floors of pharmaceutical ambition dressed up as innovation. Emma had cried when he'd dropped her at school, clinging to him at the classroom door, in a way she hadn't since those first terrible months after Rachel's death. Don't go, Daddy. Stay home with me. I have to work, sweetheart. But I'll be home when school ends just like always. What if bad men come to your new job? Then I'll be very careful and come home safe to you. But what if you can't? The teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd been patient with Emma's grief and trauma for 2 years, had gently intervened, peeling small fingers from Marcus's jacket while whispering reassurances he couldn't hear. Emma's face as he'd walked away would haunt him through the morning. The lobby guard recognized him instantly. "Mr. Bennett." "Sir." "I saw the video. What you did, that was incredible. Real hero stuff. Just doing what anyone should do." "Not anyone did, though. Just you. Respect, sir. Real respect." The executive elevator required a special badge that Sarah Preston had messengered over yesterday, along with a packet of onboarding materials that read like something HR had drafted to cover legal requirements while conveying zero useful information. His office was on the 43rd floor corner position, with views of the Hudson River, and enough square footage to house a family of 4. The desk was mahogany. The chair was leather. The computer setup was cutting edge, and all of it felt wrong. Marcus didn't belong in corner offices. He belonged in server rooms and security booths and places where actual work happened instead of being discussed in meetings about meetings. Sarah Preston materialized at 9, exactly professional in a charcoal Armani suit that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. "Welcome to Sterling Medical. Coffee black if you're offering." She poured from an actual French press when had coffee stopped being commodity and become ritual, and settled into the chair across from his desk. "First day is always overwhelming, so I'll keep this brief. Your priority is implementing comprehensive security protocols starting with executive protection. Victoria's agreed to everything you recommended. No pushback. No budget constraints. What's her schedule look like today?" "Board presentation at 10. Lunch meeting with potential investors at 12:30. Technology demo at 3. Dinner with her sister at 7. The dinner's the only personal item she's had on her calendar in 6 months. How does she currently get to these locations? Drives herself in a Tesla. No security detail routes are predictable. Parking locations are consistent. She's a stalker's dream target. That changes immediately. I need a driver vetted and in place by tomorrow route randomization software, and her personal vehicle needs to stay garaged until we've swept it for tracking devices. You think someone planted trackers? I think we operate from a threat assumption until proven otherwise. Kyle Barrett and his partner had Victoria's location and timing down to the minute. That suggests either surveillance or inside information. Inside information from where? That's what I'm going to find out. Sarah's expression shifted, FBI background reasserting itself. You're suggesting we have an insider threat. I'm suggesting we eliminate possibilities systematically, instead of assuming the threat ended when we arrested 2 pawns. The morning dissolved into meetings that felt like endurance tests. HR orientation covering policies Marcus would never remember. IT setup going through systems he'd already taught himself by reading documentation. Benefits enrollment that reminded him he was trading flexibility for golden handcuffs. At 11:30, Victoria's assistant Jennifer, mid-20s, terrified of her boss, knocked tentatively. "Ms. Sterling would like to see you before her board presentation." Victoria's office occupied the corner of 44th floor floor-to-ceiling windows, offering 360-degree views of Manhattan spread out like a kingdom she'd conquered through brilliance and ruthlessness. She stood at the window when he entered, silhouette against glass and sky. "Marcus, how's the first morning bureaucratic? How are you holding up?" "Terrified. The board presentation is my first chance to show them I'm serious about transformation. If I come across as defensive or unchanged, they'll accelerate my timeline. Then don't be defensive. Own your mistakes. Present concrete changes already in motion. Ask for their support instead of demanding their compliance." She turned from the window, vulnerability evident in ways her corporate mask couldn't quite hide. That's harder than it sounds for someone who's spent 15 years proving she doesn't need anyone's support. Everyone needs support. The difference is whether you're brave enough to admit it. Is that one of your famous quotes that'll end up on motivational posters? Just truth. Same as when I tell you that your lunch meeting location leaked to press there'll be cameras waiting when you arrive. Victoria's jaw tightened. How did media get my schedule? Same way Kyle Barrett got it. Someone inside Sterling is providing information to outside parties. Could be corporate espionage, could be simple gossip, could be deliberate sabotage. I'll find out which. The board presentation went better than Victoria's fear had predicted. Marcus watched from the back of the room as she owned her failures without excuse, outlined structural changes already implemented, and invited board oversight instead of resisting it. Chairman Douglas Mitchell's expression softened incrementally. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement that effort was being made. Afterward, Sarah Preston pulled Marcus aside with information that turned his investigation from theoretical to urgent. We got preliminary FBI reports on Kyle Barrett and Brett Hutchison. They weren't freelance criminals looking for ransom opportunity. BioCore Medical paid them $80,000 to extract Victoria and force her to reveal proprietary information about Sterling's pancreatic cancer detection technology. Corporate espionage, funded and coordinated. The attack at Freshmart was precision planned, 6 weeks in development. They had Victoria's patterns memorized, knew exactly when she'd be vulnerable. How did they get that level of detail on her movements? That's the question that should terrify us. Kyle's phone records show communication with a Sterling medical employee, but the contact used burner phones and encrypted apps. We can't identify who without deeper investigation. I need to interview Kyle Barrett. FBI won't allow that without proper channels. Then open proper channels. I taught Kyle threat assessment 3 years ago. He might talk to me when he won't talk to federal investigators. The meeting happened Friday afternoon at Essex County Correctional Facility interview room, with cameras running and FBI observer present. Kyle Barrett looked smaller in orange jumpsuit than he had wielding a knife at Freshmart, diminished by consequences and concrete walls. Mr. Bennett, didn't expect to see you again. Kyle, what happened 3 years ago? You were dedicated security professional with a family. How'd you get here? Life happened. Lost my job when the company I worked for went under budget cuts outsourcing the usual corporate garbage. Couldn't find equivalent work, burned through savings, lost the house. And then Jackson got sick. Your son, acute lymphoblastic leukemia. 6 years old, suddenly fighting for his life. Treatment costs $300,000. Minimum insurance had lapsed when I lost my job, and Michelle was working 2 minimum wage positions that barely covered rent. So you took BioCore's money. They offered $50,000 upfront, $50,000 more after completion. Enough to get Jackson into treatment trials that might save his life. What would you do? Mr. Bennett, if Emma was dying and someone offered you the money to save her. The question landed like a blade between ribs. Marcus understood desperation intimately, had lived with it since Rachel's death, made decisions that sacrificed future stability for immediate survival. The line between Kyle's choice and his own was thinner than comfortable. I'd find another way. Easy to say when you're not watching your kid suffer, when you're not fielding calls from collection agencies while your son vomits from chemo he can barely access. The sympathy Marcus felt made what he needed to ask harder. Who at Sterling gave you Victoria's schedule? Kyle's expression shuddered. They said if I kept quiet, they'd continue funding Jackson's treatment even after I got arrested, said my family would be taken care of. And if you talk, they cut the funding. My son dies. What if I told you Sterling Medical would cover Jackson's full treatment costs regardless of what you tell me? Kyle's laugh was bitter. Why would they do that? Because I'm recommending it. Because your son shouldn't pay for your mistakes. Because the mission of saving lives doesn't stop being important just because his father made terrible choices. Tears formed in Kyle's eyes. You'd really do that even after I tried to hurt that woman, even after you got injured stopping me. I'm doing it for Jackson, not for you. Now tell me who gave you the information. Thomas Richard Ashford, Vice President of Research and Development. He's been selling Sterling secrets to BioCore for 18 months. used the kidnapping plan to cover his tracks and eliminate Victoria before she discovered his theft. The investigation moved quickly once Marcus had a name. Sarah Preston coordinated with FBI while Marcus ran parallel analysis through Sterling's systems. Digital forensics revealed encrypted emails between Ashford and Biocore executives. Financial records showed $250,000 in offshore accounts. Calendar access logs confirmed Ashford had been pulling Victoria's schedule and movements for months, but they needed more than evidence. They needed to catch him in an act that couldn't be explained away by expensive lawyers. "We set a trap," Marcus proposed. "Leak false information that Victoria's changing security protocols that we've discovered irregularities. Make Ashford think his operation is about to be exposed. Force him to make a desperate move. You're using Victoria as bait. I'm using controlled exposure to flush out a threat we know exists. There's a technology announcement event scheduled for next week. 500 attendees, media coverage, perfect opportunity for Ashford to try eliminating the problem. And if he does, we'll be ready." The event took place Wednesday evening at the Natural History Museum. Sterling Medical's new portable diagnostic technology unveiled to investors and press. Victoria presented with the passion that had built her company, explaining how affordable early detection would save thousands of lives annually, how technology could democratize healthcare access. Marcus watched from the wings, scanning faces in the crowd, tracking movements, waiting for the anomaly that would signal danger. Sarah Preston coordinated security teams positioned throughout the venue. Bob Dawson, who'd volunteered his expertise, monitored exits and emergency routes. Ashford appeared at 7:15, moving through the crowd with practiced ease, but his eyes kept darting to exits, checking phones exhibiting stress behaviors inconsistent with routine attendance. At 7:40, during Victoria's demonstration of the pancreatic cancer detection device, fire alarms erupted throughout the museum. Not real fire, Marcus had checked systems personally, but triggered remotely to create chaos and evacuation panic. He spotted Ashford moving against the crowd flow, heading toward Victoria instead of away. The bulge under his suit jacket resolved into the distinctive shape of a utility knife, same type Kyle Barrett had carried, same type that could wound without obvious premeditation. Marcus intercepted before Ashford reached Victoria, stepping directly into his path. "Thomas, going somewhere." "Get out of my way, Bennett. This doesn't concern you." The knife appeared, desperation replacing corporate professionalism. Ashford lunged, and Marcus redirected the energy, using momentum against him, the way 5 years teaching judo had ingrained his muscle memory. But his ribs, still healing from Freshmart, protested violently. Pain exploded across his side and the world tilted. Ashford recovered faster than expected, swinging again. The blade caught Marcus's forearm, shallow cut that burned like fire. Blood bloomed through his sleeve. Then Bob Dawson was there, former Marine reflexes still sharp at 62. He caught Ashford's wrist mid-swing and twisted with economical precision. The knife clattered away. Ashford went down hard, face pressed to marble floor, Bob's knee in his spine. FBI agents materialized, badges displayed reading rights that Ashford couldn't hear through his own desperate sobbing. "You don't understand. Biocore offered me $2 million. $2 million sterling, pays me $160,000 and expects 70-hour weeks. I gave this company 15 years and got nothing, while Victoria Sterling became a billionaire. So you decided kidnapping and attempted murder were reasonable career advancement strategies. I needed the money. My daughter's wedding, my son's college retirement. I'll never afford on my salary. Biocore offered everything. Sterling refused to pay for loyalty." Marcus watched FBI lead Ashford away and felt hollow victory. Another desperate man making terrible choices, another family destroyed by decisions rooted in financial desperation. The system that created Kyle Barrett's circumstances had created Ashford's two different scale, same fundamental disease. Victoria found him in the museum bathroom 10 minutes later, paramedic wrapping the forearm cut with practiced efficiency. "You're hurt again. Because of me again. Because of Thomas Ashford's choices. And because I wasn't fast enough. You saved my life a second time. I did my job. which includes telling you that your company's compensation structure incentivizes exactly this kind of betrayal. Ashford made terrible choices, but those choices grew from soil Sterling helped create. You're saying I underpay executives. I'm saying loyalty can't be bought with fear and inadequate compensation. You want employees who won't sell secrets. Create culture where they feel valued beyond their exploitation potential. The board meeting 2 days later felt like good. Judgment rendered. Chairman Douglas Mitchell presided with the gravitas of a man who'd seen corporations rise and fall on leadership decisions. Ms. Sterling, this board convened to evaluate your 90-day progress toward demonstrable leadership transformation. We'll hear from Chief Security Officer Bennett first. Marcus stood conscious that his words could save or doom Victoria's position. 3 months ago, I was skeptical that meaningful change was possible. Ms. Sterling had dismissed my security recommendations, treated me dismissively, and embodied the leadership style this board identified as problematic. I had little reason to believe transformation claims were genuine. The room went silent, waiting for the axe to fall. I was wrong. The changes I've witnessed aren't cosmetic adjustments for board approval. They represent fundamental shift in how Sterling Medical operates. Employee satisfaction has increased 34%. Security protocols are now industry-leading. Ms. Sterling has implemented feedback mechanisms that give every employee voice in company direction. She's addressed compensation inequities that made people like Thomas Ashford vulnerable to outside recruitment. More importantly, she's created an environment where people can speak truth to power without fear of retaliation. That's the foundation of both good security and good leadership. Chairman Mitchell's expression revealed nothing. Are you recommending we retain Ms. Sterling as CEO? I'm recommending we recognize that perfect leaders don't exist, but leaders willing to genuinely evolve are rare and valuable. Sterling Medical develops technology that saves lives. That mission deserves leadership committed to continuous improvement rather than defensive entrenchment. The board voted 6-2 to retain Victoria with conditions continued, quarterly reviews, mandatory executive coaching, enhanced oversight mechanisms. Not a full victory, but survival with dignity intact. Victoria found Marcus afterward in his office where he was updating security protocols and trying to ignore the throbbing in his bandaged forearm. You could have destroyed me in that boardroom. Told them I was performing change rather than embodying it. Was that true? No. Then why would I say it? I don't lie to make people comfortable. That's not the job you hired me for. She sat across from him, exhaustion evident in ways her corporate mask no longer bothered hiding. There's a charity gala next month. Benefits pediatric cancer research. I'd like you and Emma to attend as my personal guests. Emma's 8. Galas aren't exactly her scene. There's a children's area with science demonstrations, and honestly, I'd like to meet her properly. The girl who made her father brave enough to save strangers. I'll ask Emma. But Victoria, this isn't a photo opportunity. If she comes, it's because she wants to, not because it helps your image rehabilitation. I know. That's why I'm asking you first instead of making it corporate event invitation. Marcus walked into his apartment that evening to find Emma already home from the after-school program working on homework at their small kitchen table. She looked up when he entered, and her face lit with relief that squeezed his heart. You came home. I promised I would. Promises can break. Mommy promised too. Marcus knelt beside her chair, eye level with his daughter. You're right. I can't promise I'll always come home because life doesn't work that way. But I can promise I'll always do everything possible to come home to you, that I'll be as careful as I can be while still doing the job that keeps us safe. Did you catch the bad person at your work? Yes. He won't hurt anyone anymore. Are there more bad people? Probably. But there are more good people too. And the good people are going to win because we work harder and care more. Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to complex ideas. Is the CEO lady good now? Did she learn? She's learning. Getting better every day. Like how you learned long division hard at first, but easier with practice. Can I meet her? The question surprised him. Why would you want to meet her? Because she's important to you. And because maybe if I see her being nice, I'll know you're safe at work. Children's logic cutting through complexity to emotional truth. Emma needed to witness that the person Marcus worked for valued him, treated him well, represented safety rather than threat. There's an event next month. Science demonstrations for kids, fancy party for adults. She invited us both. Would you want to go? Emma's face transformed with excitement that had been rare since Rachel's death. Really? Like a princess party, but with science. Something like that. But if we go and you don't like it, we can leave whenever you want. Your comfort matters more than fancy parties. I want to go. I want to see if she really learned to be nice. The next weeks blurred into routine that felt almost normal. Marcus implemented security protocols that made Sterling Medical the industry standard. Victoria attended leadership coaching and actually applied lessons instead of performing compliance. Emma adjusted to her father's new schedule and seemed to relax incrementally as weeks passed without crisis. The gala arrived with Emma vibrating excitement in a blue dress she'd picked herself, twirling in front of their apartment mirror, while Marcus adjusted his tie for the fourth time. Bob Dawson and his wife Margaret drove them to the Natural History Museum, now decorated with elegant lighting and flower arrangements that transformed the space into something from movies Emma had watched but never experienced. Victoria waited at the entrance, elegant in a simple black dress that managed sophistication without ostentation. She knelt to Emma's eye level, immediately meeting her as equal rather than looking down. "Emma, I love your dress. Blue is my favorite color, too." Emma's earlier nervousness melted into directness. "Are you really being nicer to people now or just pretending?" The question drew surprised laughter from nearby guests, but Victoria's expression stayed serious. "I'm trying very hard to be better. Your daddy has been teaching me how. Do you think he's a good teacher?" "The best. He teaches me about being brave and helping people even when it's hard. Then I'm very lucky to have him helping me too. Would you like to see the science exhibits? There's one that shows how doctors can see inside your body without hurting you." Emma took Victoria's offered hand with the trust children extend when they sense authenticity, and Marcus watched his daughter and his employer walk toward discovery, while his heart did complicated things in his chest. The gala's children's area occupied an entire wing of the museum, transformed into interactive science wonderland that made Emma's eyes go wide with possibilities. Victoria guided her from station to station, explaining medical imaging technology with the patience of someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to share knowledge without condescension. Marcus hung back, watching his daughter's enthusiasm resurface in ways he hadn't seen since before Rachel's death. Emma asked questions rapid fire. How does the scanner see bones? Why doesn't it hurt? Can it find problems before people get sick? And Victoria answered each one with genuine engagement rather than adult placation. Bob Dawson materialized beside Marcus, champagne flute in hand, despite claiming he didn't drink anymore. "Your daughter's conducting a pretty thorough character assessment. She's been worried about whether Victoria is trustworthy. Needed to see for herself. Smart kid. What's your assessment after 3 months working together?" Honest answer. "She's changed more than I thought possible. Still has moments of reverting to old patterns, impatience, controlling tendencies. But she catches herself now. Apologizes. Adjusts. That's not performance. That's actual growth. And how do you feel about her?" The question landed with implications. Marcus wasn't ready to examine. "She's my employer, someone I'm helping develop better leadership practices." Bob's knowing look suggested he saw through the deflection. "Son, I've been watching you two interact. There's something there beyond professional respect. Question is whether you're brave enough to acknowledge it." Emma's 8 years old and still healing from losing her mother. "I can't risk her stability for something uncertain. Life is uncertainty. The choice is whether you face it alone or with someone who understands your demons because they've fought similar ones." Before Marcus could respond, Emma ran over with excitement radiating from every fiber. Daddy. Ms. Sterling says there's a display about how they're working on curing the kind of cancer that killed Grandma Elena. Can we go see? The fact that Emma knew Victoria's mother's name meant they'd been having deeper conversations than small talk. Marcus nodded permission and watched them head toward an exhibit featuring pancreatic cancer research, his daughter's hand tucked trustingly into Victoria's. Margaret Dawson joined her husband, silver hair elegant under museum lighting. That's a woman trying very hard to be worthy of a second chance, or a woman who's very good at performing transformation for an audience. Margaret's look was gentle but firm. Marcus. Dear, I've been a therapist for 40 years. I can spot performative change versus genuine struggle. What Victoria's doing, the way she listens to Emma, the vulnerability she's allowing herself, that's not acting. That's someone learning to be human again after years of emotional armor. The main gala opened at 500 guests in formal wear celebrating medical innovation while raising millions for pediatric cancer research. Victoria's speech acknowledged her company's past failures alongside its technological achievements, thanking employees by name, including Marcus, for helping Sterling Medical become an organization worth believing in. The applause was genuine, no longer the polite corporate obligation Marcus had witnessed at earlier events. Emma fell asleep against Marcus's shoulder by 9:30, exhausted by excitement and sensory overload. Victoria found them in a quiet corner where Marcus had retreated, letting his daughter rest while donors networked and champagne flowed. She looks peaceful. First time she's been this relaxed at a public event since Rachel's funeral. Usually she's anxious in crowds, because she feels safe here, because you made it safe. Victoria sat beside them, careful not to disturb Emma. Can I tell you something? Not CEO to employee, just person to person. Of course. Today, watching Emma learn about medical technology, seeing her face light up when she understood how early detection saves lives, that's why I built this company. Not for board approval or stock prices, but for moments where a little girl discovers hope in science. My mother would have loved meeting Emma. They have the same curious spirit, same way of asking questions that get to the heart of things. The grief in her voice was fresh despite 19 years of distance. You still miss her. Every single day. Especially moments like tonight when I wish I could show her what her death inspired me to create. Proof that her life mattered beyond the poverty and pain. It mattered because she raised someone who fights to make sure other mothers don't die the same way. Victoria's eyes glistened with tears she didn't bother hiding. I don't deserve your kindness after how I treated you. People don't deserve kindness. They just need it. Same way drowning people don't deserve rescue. They just need someone willing to jump in the water. Emma stirred against Marcus's shoulder, mumbled something about cancer cells, and went back to sleep. Victoria watched with an expression Marcus couldn't quite parse, longing, mixed with something softer, more vulnerable. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest, even if the answer is no. Marcus waited, sensing the weight of whatever was coming. These past 3 months working with you, learning from you, seeing how you navigate the world with integrity, even when it costs you. I've developed feelings that go beyond professional respect or gratitude. Her voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. I understand if that's unwelcome. I understand the power dynamic is complicated, that your daughter's well-being has to come first, that I'm probably the last person you'd consider for anything personal. But I needed you to know, because hiding it felt like reverting to the version of myself who lied to avoid vulnerability. Marcus's heart rate accelerated, fight or flight response triggered by emotional territory he'd avoided since Rachel's death. Victoria White. You don't have to respond now, or ever if you don't want to. I just needed to be honest. She stood, composed herself with visible effort, and walked back toward the gala crowd before Marcus could formulate thoughts into coherent response. Emma shifted in his arms. Is Ms. Sterling your girlfriend now? The question jolted him. You were awake just a little bit. She likes you. I can tell. How can you tell? Because she smiles different when you're around. like how you smile different when you look at her. Children's observation skills were terrifying in their accuracy. It's complicated, sweetheart. Grown-ups always say that, but it's simple, yes or no, Daddy. Do you like her? The simple question deserved honest answer. I think I might, but that scares me. Because of Mommy. Because I don't want you to get hurt if things don't work out. Emma sat up, looked at him with Rachel's blue eyes, and spoke with wisdom beyond 8 years. Mommy told me something before she died. She made me promise to tell you when you were ready. Marcus's throat tightened. What did Mommy say? She said, take care of Daddy. Make sure he doesn't forget to live, not just survive. Make sure he remembers that being scared of losing people isn't a good reason to stop loving people. The words landed like revelation and rebuke simultaneously. Rachel had known, of course, she'd known that Marcus would retreat into protective isolation after she died, and she'd left instructions with their 6-year-old daughter to pull him back toward life when the time came. You really think it's okay? If I have feelings for Victoria, I think Mommy would want you to be happy. And I think Ms. Sterling makes you less sad than you've been. The next 3 months transformed corporate relationships into something resembling friendship. Marcus and Victoria fell into patterns that felt like courtship, without official acknowledgement. Coffee meetings that ran long conversations that ranged from security protocols to childhood memories. Comfortable silences that spoke louder than words. Sterling Medical flourished under leadership that valued employees as humans rather than productivity metrics. Security protocols Marcus implemented became industry standard. The company's stock price rose 40% as investors recognized that ethical business practices and profitability weren't mutually exclusive. Emma's nightmares about bad men coming back faded gradually. She started sleeping through the night again, stopped checking windows obsessively, began to trust that her world could be stable even after everything had shattered. But Marcus maintained careful boundaries. No dates, no physical contact beyond professional handshakes, no explicit acknowledgement of the feelings growing between them like vines through cracks in concrete. Until Emma decided to intervene. The school science fair fell on a Tuesday in late April, 6 months after the Freshmart incident had upended their lives. Emma's project on medical diagnostic technology, inspired by the gala and secretly researched with Victoria's help, won 2nd place in the 3rd grade division. Victoria attended without invitation, showing up with flowers and genuine enthusiasm that made Emma glow with pride. Afterward, the 3 of them grabbed pizza at a place near Emma's school, cheap and cheerful, with red-checked tablecloths and a jukebox playing 80s hits. Victoria looked surreal in her business suit, surrounded by families and teenagers, but she seemed more relaxed than Marcus had ever seen her in corporate settings. Emma waited until they'd finished eating, before launching her campaign. Miss Sterling, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you like my daddy? Victoria glanced at Marcus, who suddenly found the remains of his pizza fascinating. Very much. Your daddy is an exceptional person. No. I mean, do you like him? Like want to be his girlfriend. Like Emma Claire Bennett. It's okay, Marcus. Victoria turned her full attention to Emma, treating the question with the seriousness it deserved. Yes, I like your daddy that way, but it's complicated because I'm his boss, and because your feelings matter most, and because starting a relationship is scary when you care about someone enough that losing them would hurt. Daddy says things are complicated too, but I think grown-ups make things complicated when they're scared. Emma's 8-year-old logic cut through their carefully constructed defenses. What do you think we should do? I think you should be more than friends. Because Daddy smiles more when you're around, and you're nicer to everyone when he's there. And Mommy told me to make sure Daddy doesn't forget to live. The pizza place had gone quiet around them. Other families pretending not to listen while absolutely listening. Your Mommy sounds like she was very wise. She was. And she told me to tell Daddy that being scared of losing people isn't a good reason to stop loving them. Victoria's eyes filled with tears that she didn't try to hide. She's right. Your mommy is absolutely right. Emma turned to Marcus with determination that would have made Rachel proud. So are you going to ask Ms. Sterling to be your girlfriend, or do I have to do everything? The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his response. Marcus looked at Victoria. Brilliant, flawed, courageous. Victoria, who'd rebuilt herself from corporate shark into someone capable of crying in cheap pizza places over wisdom from dead women delivered by 8-year-old matchmakers. Emma, this isn't how adults usually. Please, Daddy. I don't want you to be alone forever. And Ms. Sterling is nice now. She learned. And she makes you happy. The plea in his daughter's voice broke something that had been carefully locked since Rachel's funeral. Emma wasn't just giving permission, she was begging him to choose life over protective isolation. Marcus turned to Victoria. Would you like to have dinner with me? Not a business meeting, not a strategy session. An actual date. Victoria's smile transformed her face. I would like that very much. Emma clapped her hands together. Finally, can I tell Grandma Margaret and Grandpa Howard that you have a girlfriend now? Let's maybe start with one date before we update the grandparents. But the joy radiating from Emma told Marcus he'd made the right choice even if terror still coiled in his chest alongside hope. Their first official date happened the following Saturday. Margaret and Howard Fletcher kept Emma overnight, giving Marcus space to navigate this new territory without 8-year-old supervision. Victoria picked him up at 7 in jeans and a sweater. No corporate armor, just a woman trying to figure out how to be normal. Where are we going? Somewhere I haven't been since I was 19. Before I decided vulnerability was weakness and emotional armor was survival strategy. She drove to a small Italian restaurant in Newark, tucked between a laundromat and a convenience store in a neighborhood gentrification hadn't discovered. My mother worked here as a waitress for 6 years. Owners still remember her. They sent flowers to her funeral and offered to pay for part of the service. The inside smelled of garlic and tomato sauce and years of family dinners. An older woman emerged from the kitchen and stopped dead when she saw Victoria. Elena's girl, little Victoria, who used to do homework in the corner booth. Hi, Mrs. Castellano. It's been 19 years. The woman pulled Victoria into a hug that seemed to break through final barriers. Victoria cried against her shoulder while Marcus stood awkwardly nearby, witnessing grief that had been buried under ambition and survival for nearly 2 decades. Your mama was so proud of you. Used to show everyone pictures of you at college, tell us how you were going to change the world. Did she know? Before she died, did she know I loved her? Honey, she knew. She knew, and she was proud. Never doubt that. Over pasta that tasted like comfort and wine that loosened tongues. Victoria talked about her mother in ways she'd never allowed herself before. Elena's terrible jokes, her habit of singing while she cooked the way she'd saved quarters in a jar labeled Victoria's Dreams, even when they could barely afford groceries. I built Sterling Medical to honor her, but somewhere I lost sight of what she actually valued. She cared about people, about kindness, about making others' lives better, even in small ways. And I became someone focused on profit margins and market dominance. You're finding your way back to her values. That's what growth looks like, not perfection, but course correction. Is that what we're doing? Course correcting toward better versions of ourselves? I think we're doing something scarier than that. We're choosing to trust that better versions are possible. Victoria reached across the table, took his hand in hers. I'm terrified, Marcus. Terrified I'll revert to old patterns, terrified I'll hurt you, or Emma terrified I'll prove everyone right who said people don't really change. Fear means you're risking something that matters. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's deciding the possible reward is worth the guaranteed discomfort. They kissed outside his apartment at 11:30, tentative and sweet, and nothing like the passion that came from certainty. This was the kiss of 2 people who'd survived loss and were choosing hope, despite every reason to choose safety. The following 6 months unfolded with the kind of ordinary magic that survivors learned to treasure. Marcus and Victoria dated like normal people, dinners at restaurants that didn't require reservations. Movies on weeknights when Emma stayed with the Fletchers, long walks through Central Park where nobody recognized the CEO of Sterling Medical in jeans and sneakers. Emma adjusted with the resilience of children who understand that love expanding doesn't mean previous love diminishing. She tested boundaries, occasionally asking pointed questions about whether Victoria would leave like Mommy had, watching carefully when they held hands, processing this new configuration of family with the seriousness she brought to complex problems. But mostly, she seemed relieved, as if her father choosing happiness lifted weight she'd been carrying without realizing the burden children feel when they become their parents' sole source of joy. Margaret and Howard Fletcher gave cautious approval, recognizing that Marcus was healing in ways grief counseling had never achieved. Howard pulled him aside one Sunday afternoon while Emma and Margaret baked cookies. "Rachel would be happy for you. She told me once that if anything happened to her, she hoped you'd find someone who'd love Emma as fiercely as you do." She said that 2 weeks before the accident. We were talking about life insurance, estate planning, the morbid logistics nobody wants to discuss. And she made me promise that if she died, I'd remind you that you deserved to be happy. That Emma deserved to see her father living fully, not just surviving. Marcus's eyes burned with tears he'd been holding since the pizza place intervention. "I'm still scared. Every time Victoria leaves, every time Emma's at school, I remember how fast everything can be taken away. Being scared means you're alive and paying attention. But don't let that fear make Emma's choices for her. She's telling you clearly what she needs: a father who shows her that love is worth the risk." Bob Dawson insisted on background checking Victoria despite Marcus's protests, then grudgingly admitted she passed every test except being slightly too good at corporate strategy games. His wife Margaret, the therapist, declared Victoria's transformation genuine. After one dinner conversation citing specific behavioral markers Marcus didn't fully understand, but chose to trust. Sterling Medical announced record quarterly earnings alongside unprecedented employee satisfaction scores. The board's quarterly review of Victoria's leadership ended with unanimous approval and relaxation of oversight requirements. Chairman Mitchell pulled Marcus aside afterward. "Whatever you're doing, Mr. Bennett, it's working. She's become the leader we always hoped she could be. I'm not doing anything except telling her the truth when she asks for it." That's everything. Most people in her position are surrounded by yes-men who care more about their jobs than her growth. You care about the mission more than the politics. That makes all the difference. Kyle Barrett's son entered remission 8 months into treatment, funded by Sterling Medical's new Employee Crisis Assistance Program, Victoria's idea implemented over finance department objections. Kyle sent a letter from prison thanking Marcus for grace he didn't deserve, promising to spend his sentence becoming someone his son could be proud of. Thomas Ashford received 15 years for corporate espionage and attempted murder. The trial revealed he'd received $250,000 as advance payment from BioCore Medical, with $2 million promised upon successful extraction of Victoria and Sterling's proprietary technology. His family disowned him, unable to reconcile the man they'd known with the criminal he'd become. Emma's 9th birthday arrived in early November, exactly 1 year after the Fresh Mart incident that had changed everything. Victoria helped organize a party that featured science experiments and a magician who specialized in explaining the physics behind his tricks. 20 third graders shrieked with delight while dry ice created fog effects and vinegar volcanoes erupted across the Fletchers' backyard. That evening, after guests departed and Emma crashed into sugar coma sleep, Marcus and Victoria sat on the Fletchers' back porch watching Newark lights flicker to life against darkening sky. She's grown so much this year. Braver, more confident, less haunted by what she's lost. You helped with that, showing her that adults can change, that mistakes don't define us forever. That's powerful medicine for a kid who's been scared. The world is only loss and pain. Victoria leaned against him, comfortable in ways she'd never been comfortable with anyone. I need to tell you something. I've been holding it back because I didn't want to pressure you, but keeping it secret feels like lying. Marcus's chest tightened with old fear. Here was the revelation that would ruin everything, the hidden truth that would prove his worst anxieties correct. Okay, I love you. I'm in love with you. And I know that's terrifying given everything we've both lost, but I can't keep pretending what I feel is anything less than that. The declaration hung between them, vulnerable and brave, and everything Marcus had been too scared to voice despite feeling it for months. I love you too. And you're right, it's absolutely terrifying. But terror isn't a good reason to choose isolation over connection. Emma taught me that. You taught me that. Rachel taught me that before she died. Victoria's smile was radiant and relieved and still edged with fear. So what do we do now? We keep doing what we've been doing, building trust, showing up for each other, proving that choosing love doesn't guarantee pain, even though it risks it. The truth was, both had learned that nothing lasted forever. Rachel had died at 33. Elena Sterling had died at 47. Life was brutally finite and randomly cruel. But that finitude made choice meaningful. Every day they chose each other was a small rebellion against loss and fear. Marcus proposed on a Wednesday evening in March, 16 months after a grocery store incident had brought them together. Nothing elaborate, just a question asked on his apartment balcony, while Emma pretended to do homework inside, but was actually watching through the window with barely contained excitement. Victoria had come over for dinner, routine now comfortable. She helped Marcus cook, while Emma set the table, the three of them moving around each other with practiced ease that felt like family. After dinner, while Emma loaded the dishwasher with exaggerated focus, Marcus led Victoria outside to where Newark spread below them in familiar chaos. I've been thinking about something Emma said months ago, about how grown-ups make things complicated when they're scared. She's terrifyingly perceptive. She is. And she's right. I've been making this complicated because I'm scared. Scared of losing you, the way I lost Rachel, scared of disrupting Emma's stability, scared that choosing happiness means forgetting the person who taught me how to love in the first place. But Victoria held up her hand, stopping him. You don't forget Rachel by loving someone new. You honor her by showing Emma that her mother's death didn't kill your capacity for joy. That's not forgetting, that's surviving with grace. Marcus pulled the ring from his pocket, simple band with a small diamond. Nothing ostentatious, because Victoria had never cared about expensive things, only meaningful ones. Marry me. Build a life with me and Emma. Let's choose love, even though we know how badly loss can hurt. Victoria's yes came with tears and laughter and the kind of joy that only survived people understood. Happiness precious because it was chosen despite grief, not in ignorance of it. Emma burst through the balcony door, abandoning all pretense of homework. She said, "Yes, you're getting married. I get to be in the wedding." Victoria knelt to Emma's level, taking small hands in hers. Yes to all three, but only if you're okay with it. Your opinion matters most. Emma threw her arms around Victoria's neck with the fierce enthusiasm only 9-year-olds could muster. I'm very okay with it. You make Daddy happy, and you're nice to me, and you're teaching me about science. That's everything important. They married 6 months later in early September at the courthouse small ceremony because neither wanted spectacle, just commitment witnessed by people who mattered. Emma served as junior bridesmaid in a dress she'd designed herself, complete with pockets for storing important scientific equipment, like the small notebook she carried everywhere now. Bob Dawson walked Victoria down the aisle because she had no father to do it, and he'd become something like family over the past year. Margaret and Howard Fletcher cried happy tears for the grandson-in-law who'd found love again, who'd chosen life over safe isolation. The reception happened at Perks and Pros Cafe, where their second chance had begun. Mrs. Castellano from the Italian restaurant provided catering. Elena Sterling's favorite recipes prepared with the love of someone who remembered a waitress who'd always been kind despite her own hardships. Victoria's wedding vows made Emma cry. I promise to love your father with the fierceness he deserves. I promise to be worthy of the trust you've placed in me. I promise to help you both remember that your mother's love didn't end when she died. It lives in every choice you make to be brave, to be kind, to choose connection over fear. Rachel made you both who you are. I'm just lucky enough to get to love who you've become. Marcus's vows were simpler, pulled from a conversation on a balcony months ago. I choose you. Today, tomorrow, every day we're given. Not because you're perfect, neither of us is, but because choosing you makes me braver, kinder, more fully myself than I knew how to be alone. The evening dissolved into celebration that felt earned rather than performed. Emma danced with Bob Dawson, who taught her basic waltz steps, while his wife, Margaret, looked on with affection. Howard Fletcher cornered Marcus near the dessert table. Rachel would be so proud of you, not just for finding love again, but for teaching Emma that loss doesn't mean the end of joy. I hope so. Some days I still wonder if I'm betraying her memory. You're honoring it. Every day you choose to live fully to show Emma what resilience looks like, you're proving that her mother's love was strong enough to survive even death. That's not betrayal. That's the greatest tribute you could give her. Later, after guests had departed and Emma had been picked up by the Fletchers for a sleepover, to give you newlyweds privacy, Margaret had said with knowing smile. Marcus and Victoria returned to the apartment that would soon become a house big enough for the family they were choosing to build. We did it. We actually built something good from all that pain. Victoria stood at the window, looking out at Newark's familiar chaos sirens, wailing people living the messy, beautiful work of existence, carrying forward despite grief and loss. Rachel would be proud of you. For choosing life, for letting yourself love again, for showing Emma that loss doesn't mean the end of joy. Your mother would be proud of you too. You became the person she raised you to be, someone who helps others, who values people over profit, who leads with heart. Marcus joined her at the window, this vantage point where they'd had so many conversations that had shaped their becoming. What are you thinking about? How we teach people what matters by how we choose to live. Emma learned courage by watching you fight for strangers. I learned compassion by watching you choose grace over bitterness. And maybe someday others will learn from watching us choose love, despite knowing how badly loss can hurt. Outside Newark continued its ordinary chaos. The city that had witnessed their worst moments and their best ones, that had held space for transformation and redemption, and the slow work of becoming people worthy of second chances. Marcus touched the red yarn bracelet still circling his wrist, Emma's gift from years ago, when 6-year-old wisdom had taught him to breathe through panic. He wore it always now, not as a reminder of fear, but as proof that courage came in many forms. Sometimes it meant fighting criminals with improvised weapons in grocery stores. Sometimes it meant opening your heart again after loss had taught you that love meant vulnerability to unbearable pain. Sometimes it meant letting an 8-year-old matchmaker convince you that being scared wasn't a good reason to stop choosing connection. All of it required the same fundamental choice: acting despite fear, trusting that possible reward was worth guaranteed risk, believing that being brave didn't mean not being scared, it meant being scared and doing it anyway. Victoria leaned against him. This woman who'd traveled from corporate ruthlessness to human vulnerability, who'd learned that true strength wasn't armor, but the courage to let armor fall away. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, Sterling Medical to run Emma, to raise the ordinary work of building life from love and hope and daily choices. But tonight there was only this two people who'd learned that the opposite of loss wasn't safety. It was the courage to love again anyway.